Hello and welcome to the Alcohol Recovery Show, where we discuss practical, actionable steps for anyone who wants to achieve their dream of getting and staying well, happy and free from any form of alcohol dependence. Hello and a very warm welcome to today's episode. I'm really delighted to be sharing this conversation with you because my guest is someone whose work I've found really refreshing, practical and full of hope. Today I'm joined by Amber Hollingsworth, founder of Hope for Families Recovery Centre and host of the brilliant YouTube channel Put the Shovel Down. Amber is an addiction counsellor who works with families and individuals affected by addiction. And what I love about her approach is that she manages to be both incredibly compassionate and incredibly clear. In this conversation, we talk about some of the big questions that come up around alcohol addiction and recovery. Questions like, is tough love really necessary? Do people have to hit rock bottom before they can change? Are we truly powerless over alcohol? And what can we actually do when someone we love seems to be in denial? Amber also shares some really practical wisdom about cravings, difficult feelings in sobriety, especially early sobriety, boundaries, and how to support someone without losing yourself in the process. I came away from this conversation feeling encouraged, inspired, and reminded that recovery is not about shame or punishment. It's about honesty, support, courage, and hope. So settle in, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Here's my interview with the wonderful Amber Hollingsworth. Welcome, Amber. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the field of working with people with addictions.
Sort of by accident, to be honest with you. Most people that do this kind of work got here, a lot of people from their own recovery journey. And I actually got here a little bit differently. I landed here by accident, but I came from an addicted family, as in everyone around me, like parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings. It's just everywhere, like severe addiction. But the funny part about my story is, even though it really was pretty severe, as in like my mom was doing meth with my sister severe, I didn't even realize that until I was already in the field, which is crazy. Right. It's not like I didn't realize that drinking and drugs was going on. It's more like I wouldn't even have attached the word alcoholism or addiction to it until I was in the field, because when you grow up in it, it's just you're normal and you don't even think anything about it. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, so it really just became normalized for you. Yeah, no,
yes.
I can understand that. I've had situations in my life that's only maybe when I've gone into a professional course of study or got into the line of work, I thought, oh my goodness, that's what was going on in my family, and I didn't see it at the time. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I've watched some of your YouTube content, and it seems that you are quite keen to bust some of the myths that are around about addiction.
Yes.
What sort of comes to mind first when you think about those sorts of myths that you really want to dispel with people?
I think first and foremost, I don't believe waiting for people to hit bottom. I think that that's a myth, that you have to like experience this big extreme thing, bottom that happens to you before someone's going to be motivated to change. I do agree that, you have to get uncomfortable. The cons have to start to outweigh the pros. That's for sure. But this idea of the more severely someone suffers, the more likely they are to change, I just don't really agree with that, because I think on some level, some consequences, like, for example, going to prison, losing your children, like big consequences, being homeless, I think that actually decreases the chances that you're going to get better. Not that you can't, but I think, you've burned a lot of bridges. If you go to prison, for example, you come out, it's hard to get a job. I mean, I just think some of these things can sort of against the getting better idea. So yes, it needs to get uncomfortable, but this idea, if someone's not getting better, and the reason why it's so important is because families believe this. And so they get the idea that my loved one needs to suffer more. And then they get the idea that maybe I can make that happen faster. maybe I can like push this to happen faster. And then my person, they're just going to wake up and they're going to have this big, moment of clarity. And then they're going to come to their senses. They're going to realize they got a problem. They're going to put all this behind them. When, yes, that can happen. But I think it's really dangerous to wait for that to happen, and maybe even more dangerous to try and make it happen from the family perspective.
So you don't believe in the concept of tough love?
Well, not in the traditional sense, because I think, I guess we should start out by saying a lot of people have different ideas when we say that term, tough love. And so in my mind, what comes to mind is a lot of families are told you need to kick this person out or cut them off emotionally, like stop talking to them completely if they, don't stop doing whatever they're doing. And yes, I agree that there are situations where you need to put someone out of your house, or maybe you even need to stop talking to them completely. I definitely agree with that. I don't agree with the fact that the reason why you need to do that is so that this person gets better, because almost always when those things come around, the person gets worse. When you have to make decisions like that, which could absolutely be, you got to make those decisions based on what you have to do for you. So the difference is, it's not like I need to be tougher on this person so that they can get better. But sometimes I need to distance myself for this person so I can get better because I'm crazy or there's things happening in this house that are just unsafe. Those are good reasons to make those decisions. But trying to use it as a bluff, trying to just be harsh with someone and super direct with someone for the idea of trying to help them get out of denial or get better that's really just going to backfire on you. Not only is it not going to work, but it's going to make it worse as far as what it's going to do to this other person. So that's not me saying don't do it. That's me saying get clear on why you're doing it.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. So it's more about setting your own boundaries, about what's safe for yourself as the non-addicted person, rather than trying to push for some change in the addicted person. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can you talk to us a little bit more, Amber, about your concept of a rock bottom, the problems that you have with that, and what should people look for instead, perhaps at an early stage, to identify if they actually do have issues with alcohol?
Yes, part of the problem with that line of thinking is that people don't recognize that they have this problem until they're in what I would call like an end stage version of it. And if we could learn to recognize it in like an earlier stage, then we can identify, okay, I've got this problem. I'm on the wrong track. And they can do something about it, right? Rather than waiting until they meet some kind of stereotype, some sort of end stage version, which for alcohol looks like I absolutely can't stop drinking. I'm drinking to avoid getting sick. I'm drinking every day. I've lost everything. My marriage is a mess. I've lost my driver's license. I've got fired from my job, all these things. When if we could just look at it, what they might call, the person or the family might call problematic use, can learn to identify it earlier in what most people refer to as like a functional alcoholic. That's not a clinical term, but we all kind of know what that means, right? Like, okay, I'm drinking too much. I have a problem with it, but I'm still going to work, still functioning pretty well. And outside of the people that live in my house, other people would think, oh, they don't have a problem. People, that's actually a sign. There's some things that go on during that period that is a sign that you are going to experience some of the really bad things if we don't get a hold of it. And so it's my goal to help people understand what those signs are so that they can change their direction before they suffer so much more.
You might have heard the joke, denial is not just a river in Egypt, denial is really, really hard to crack. So have you got any sort of like tips or anything maybe to help families or people, loved ones of people who are suffering addictions, about how to get through that denial?
Yes. And I tell you what, we could talk for hours and hours about this. This is sort of right up my alley, but to give you the basics of it, if you come at someone in denial directly, either confronting them, calling them out, or just saying, hey, you're alcoholic, or, you got a problem, even if you're trying to say it nicely, if you're coming at someone, trying to get them to see something that they're not wanting to see, they're 100% of the time going to get defensive with you. Now, it depends on their personality. They may or may not say defensive things, But everybody in their head is going to get defensive. Even when we know we're in the wrong, if we feel called out or cornered, we get defensive. Like, for example, let's say you're late to work. Your boss says, Amber, you're running late and you did this twice last month. What's the deal? Even if I know I'm in the wrong, I'm probably going to think and say things like, well, you don't understand. You don't have kids and there was traffic and I got to take care of my kids and the, drop off line was too long. That's what I'm going to think and say, because it's a reflex. When someone's coming at us, we defend ourselves, right? So all of those techniques not only don't work, but they make it worse, because when you're putting someone in a position to defend themselves, not only are they not going to agree with you out loud, but every time they're thinking those thoughts and saying those statements, they're convincing themselves more, right? And then, so what happens to the family member is then they decide, well, I'm going to show them this evidence, right? I'm going to collect this evidence. We're going to make these videos or show them all these bottles or whatever. And I'm going to show them evidence. And then they're going to have to admit it. And that does not work. And you go round and round and round in this sort of cat mouse dynamic, which only increases their denial and makes the person more focused on just hiding. And not only that, the person with the problem becomes more and more convinced that, yeah, they have a problem. The problem is you as the family member. They get obsessive about how you're controlling, you're negative, you're critical, you're always on their case, you never see anything they do right, you're in their business, and they just get focused on hiding the issue. So in all these different ways, it's just making the problem worse. There are things you can do to get through denial, but that is not the way to do it. It makes you the villain as the family member, which is not good.
Yeah, you want to get on side with the person and show that you're supporting them rather than just being on their back, really. So you mentioned earlier about the sort of signs that someone's got a problem with an addiction before they get to actual rock bottom. I mean, what sort of general signs, whether it's for a loved one or for the person themselves who might be concerned that they've got an addiction, what would sort of red flags would you look for?
Yeah. The biggest one I would say is it's not so much that someone has to do it every day or even that they get sick if they don't do it. The thing you want to look for is, I have trouble stopping once I start. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening when you have trouble stopping once you start is then you get upset with yourself, and then you start making these little promises to yourself and you start setting these limits. I'm not going to have more than 3, or I'm only going to do it twice a week, or I'm only going to do it on these occasions, or you start making, I call them bargains, with yourself to try to get it in some parameters, because you don't want to go over the top and you don't want to have these bad things happen to you. And so you try to get it in the lines, and sometimes you can keep it in the lines, but a lot of times you don't. And it's unpredictable. And when the dam breaks, it's not good. And really bad things happen, and you're super regretful about it. You're embarrassed. You mess up a relationship. You don't do something you were supposed to do. You do something you shouldn't have done. Something that you regret happens. And then you stay in that cycle of, let me just try to drink beer and not liquor, right? Let me just try to drink on Friday and Saturday, no drinking on Sunday or during the week. You make all these little deals with yourself. When that is happening, that is a good clue that you got a problem. That's what I would call like the stage 3. It's like you're starting to get some consequences of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it every day. It's just that you tend to go overboard, and you tend to break promises to yourself, and you tend to have regrets about it when that happens.
Yeah. No, I like your definition of once you start, you can't stop, because some people are, for example, binge drinkers, and they can maybe go weeks or even months without drinking. And then, but then it's this thing of like, once they start, even if they only mean to have like just a few drinks for night out, all hell breaks loose then.
And I would even add to that, it's not that you can't control it. It's that you can't control it consistently. Because there will be days and times, because you'll do these little tests. You'll say, see, I'm going to prove to you I can drink just 2. And you'll go buy 2, you'll drink them. So you'll be like, see. But the fact that you're testing yourself like that is a symptom of the problem, because people that don't have a problem don't do that. They don't, because it doesn't even occur to them, because it's not a thing. It's not that you can't control it. It's just that maybe you do good twice. And then because you did good with it twice, you let your guard down. And then that third time, all hell breaks loose again. Right. Yeah. And so it's inconsistent. It's like Russian roulette. The longer that goes on, the more frequently that dam will break. Right. And the more consistently you won't be able to control it. But there are many years in there where you can control it sometimes, but not all the time. And that's what I mean by we could see these things earlier on. When we have some control over it, we could do better.
Thanks for that. So we talked a bit there about lack of control. Can you talk to us a little bit about your thinking around the concept of powerlessness? Are people really powerless over alcohol?
Well, I think the term from the 12-step model, which I'm a fan of, but it has to do with once I start, I can't stop, like we were talking about before. So if the idea is I'm going to manage this consistently and I'm going to put all these rules in place and I'm going to be powerful over it, that probably is not going to work. So in that way, you're kind of powerless. But you have a ton of power about how to address the problem, right? Like I have the power to decide whether or not this is a problem. I have the power to decide how far I'm going to let this go, if I'm going to get help or I'm not going to get help, what I'm going to do about it. Like there's a lot of power in it. It's just that once you start going down that road, the further down the road you get, the less control you have over it. Your off switch lives in the front part of your brain, and alcohol literally turns the volume. It like flips the breaker, right? So the part of your brain that could say stop or don't do more than that or just stick with this gets deactivated. And so on a biological level, that's why people have a hard time controlling it. And so I think in that regard, yes, I'm powerless, but in other regards, no.
Perhaps we're not powerless over the first drink because that's making a choice.
There you go.
Drink,
yeah.
But the powerlessness probably comes with subsequent drinks because off switch, as you say.
Definitely by like 4, 5, 6, we start losing the power. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I think that people really, really struggle with, especially in early sobriety, is just those compulsive thoughts about a drink.
Yeah.
And how do you break that loop of compulsively thinking about the next drink? And I mean, I understand it, it's part of the biology and everything, having given it time. But what things would you recommend to someone who's really struggling in those first few days, weeks, and even months?
This is a technique that I use with clients, which is kind of fun. They're like monster mouths. And you have like a whole committee of these little monster mouths. It's like this argument that goes on in your head. And I like to actually give them names. Because if you visualize it, like there's this committee of, it could be versions of you, monsters, it could be versions of different people, but it's like this argument trying to convince you all the time. And so once you can name them, you can realize, oh, that's that one over there is talking to me. And they start having less hold over you. So like, for example, there's one called Just a Little Bit, right? I'm just going to have a couple. You can call them Just a Couple. That's the name of that monster mouth. You can say, I hear you. There's One Last Time, right? There's one that I call the Costco plan, which is let me go buy it in bulk because then I'll make sure that lasts me all week. And that's financially responsible. So you can call him Mr. CFO if you want to. Like I like to give them names. Then there's like life is going to suck without it. You're never going to have fun again. You're going to be, you call him, life sucks or whatever. And then you got one that says, people are going to think you're so boring and lame, right? These are these standard thoughts that you can predict. And people, not everyone has all of them, but you have very predictable ones that always come to your mind. And if you can identify them and you can almost visualize them, then you can say, all right, I'm overruling this committee, right? Because I've heard that before. That did not work for me. And it's this, there's one of the biggest ones is I call it coast is clear because people get used to sneak drinking and using or whatever. And so when their spouse is out of town or they've got this big opportunity, automatically like, oh my gosh, okay, I got my spouse has gone away for a weekend retreat or whatever. That's called coast is clear, monster mouth. And so that's what I mean when I say you can name them, you can be predictable about them, you can realize like, okay. And they happen almost in patterns. So like one will say the first thing to you, and then that one causes the second thought to come on and the fourth thought to come on. And so I work with people on what are your monster mouths? Let's name them. We even did a thing recently, which is really fun. And it's like had ChatGPT like make an image of them, like, and make this big committee and like, what do they look like? and give them names. It's kind of fun. And it just helps us to gain control back over what's really happening.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And it sort of lightens things up with a little bit of humor as well. Because even though it is a very serious subject, it doesn't need to be like really dry and really boring. And I think injecting that little bit of lightheartedness just helps. It just lightens it all up a little bit. I mean, one thing that I do hear people talking a lot about in the sort of the first days and weeks of sobriety is just because you mentioned it's one of these monster myths, and it's the one that I hear the most, is that life's just going to be boring without a drink. And when people are in that space, if that's all they've ever done to have fun, and everything that's supposed to be fun needed to involve alcohol, so they can't imagine even things like going to a music event or the theatre, or even sitting reading a book or doing a craft without having a drink to hand. How do we sort of change people's thinking, or our own thinking, if we're going through the addictive thinking ourselves, to get out of this way of thinking, life's just really boring without a drink?
One of the things is you've got to realize why it's boring without a drink. By the time you start having this conversation with yourself, you have a problem. And over the time when you've developed that problem, you've literally lost the brain capacity, the neurochemicals it would take to allow you to experience joy from something else. So every time you're not drinking or using, it pretty much sucks. So you're like, no, I've tried it, Amber. I don't like it. Right. And so you're convinced that life will be boring without it, because when you are sober, you're miserable. But I like to say that's not what sobriety is like. That's what withdrawal is like. Okay. So in order to really have a good viewpoint on how life's going to be, you got to get like at least 30 days, because the first 2 weeks they're going to suck. It's going to be worse than boring. It's going to be miserable. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's going to be crappy. So let's just be prepared for it. You're going to feel bad. You're going to not sleep good, all the things. And so you can't make a judgment decision about that until you've like let your brain chemistry, because actually what happens is sobriety gives you back the ability to experience joy and happiness and pleasure from even the little things in life. And what happens when you're in an addicted state, and this is, people talk about the horrible things that happen to you. Yes, those terrible, big, giant consequences happen, but the really bad part is that you cannot live your life anymore. Everything else in life is just you got to do in between drinks or using, and you're just irritated at everything. You get a promotion and there's a big celebration thing. You got to go to this meeting, get a promotion, and you're just irritated with it because you really want to be drinking, or you want to be drinking more, and you can't drink that much at the work celebration or whatever. And Christmas morning, and you're watching your kids, and all you can think is, when's this going to be over so I can go get a drink, right? And you lose the ability, to really be present in your life and enjoy anything else. And so what I tell people is actually, it's going to give you back that ability. And at first, when you're sober, you're like looking at other people that are drinking, and you feel sorry for yourself because you feel like you're missing out. But after you've been sober for a while, you look at people drinking and you feel sorry for them. And you're like, man, I'm so glad that's not me, because you're imagining the misery that you felt, and you're seeing how good you feel now. I mean, usually even after like 2 weeks or so, your energy's better, your sleep gets a little better, your motivation gets better. People, I tell them that, and they're like, I don't know, they don't believe you. And so if you don't believe me, what I suggest is you just give it a trial run, but you got to give it at least 30 days. And even if you don't have like severe withdrawal to go to like detox or something, you have some level of withdrawal. You're going to be irritable, discontent, can't sleep. It's not going to feel good. Okay. I'm not saying that you're shaking or in DTs or something, but you're just not going to enjoy things. You got to give that time to rebalance out neurochemically in your brain.
No, I really like the way you differentiate between sort of just general life and it's actually withdrawal. This is not how it's going to be forever in people's lives going forward. Whatever mild depression, or as you say, like discontented feelings, or just feeling like they're not getting any joy out of life, that is actually withdrawal, and that it will pass, and that things will, that joy in life will come back It's wonderful when you do see it in people's eyes, when it starts to come back again once they do stop drinking. Your centre is called Hope for Families, and I really get the sense that there is that's how you approach things with a lot of hope. How can people, how can they find out more about you, to find out more about, and just to give them that bit of hope going forward? How can they find you?
You know, you can find me anywhere. I got a website, all the social medias. My name is Amber Hollingsworth. But the best place to find me is on YouTube. I'm really mostly a YouTuber. And my YouTube channel, it has a strange name, so I'm going to tell you. It's called Put the Shovel Down. And that's an old recovery saying, and it means you hit your bottom when you put a shovel down, as in you don't have to burn every bridge. You don't have to ruin your whole life. You can decide, this is enough. That's no fun. You're going to put the shovel down. So you can find me on YouTube under Put the Shovel Down. And there are more than 1,000 videos, probably getting close to 2,000 now videos.
Wonderful.
And there are videos on there for you if this is you and you're trying to make a change or thinking about it, or if you have a loved one who's struggling. How do I approach them in a way that's going to not make them defensive, that's actually going to be helpful? There's tons and tons of help and resource there. It's all free. That's where I would start.
Fantastic. I'll put all of those in the notes with the description to go with the podcast episode. But it's been a really uplifting conversation with you, Amber. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you very
appreciate
much.
it. Yeah.
So there you have it. That was my interview with the lovely Amber Hollingsworth. Apologies for the quality of some of the recording. It was recorded on a call over Zoom. The internet wasn't fantastic, but I hope it doesn't interfere with your enjoyment of the episode today. Thank you very much for listening. And until next time, take care and stay well.
Until next week, thanks so much for being here. Bye for now. Bye. Bye.